At 9:40 p.m., Gloria made her way toward the parking lot. What had been an ordinary evening shattered in a matter of seconds. Out of the shadows, a figure advanced quickly. His footsteps were sharp, deliberate, and filled with purpose. There was no greeting, no hesitation, and no warning. Without a single word exchanged, the night was ripped apart by violence. The man drew a weapon, raised it with chilling precision, and the crack of a gunshot split the silence. The attack was sudden, calculated, and devastating. Panic spread instantly as the reality of the moment took hold. But fate had placed an unlikely guardian nearby. Only a short distance away, an off-duty police officer heard the shot ring out. Acting without hesitation, he sprang into action. Following the sound, he located the suspect's vehicle as the man attempted to flee the scene. The officer intercepted him and ordered him to stop. But instead of surrendering, the suspect made a different choice, a reckless and violent one. He turned to confrontation, pulling the situation into a dangerous escalation. Dear viewers, thank you for choosing our video and our channel. We put a lot of effort into making sure you enjoy being with us. Gloria Zamora entered the world around 1985 in Fresno, California, the third child in a household built on both hope and hardship. Her parents were Mexican immigrants, determined to create a future far removed from the struggles of their homeland. Her mother came from the region of Palpa in Zacatecas, while her father hailed from the town of Caima. Both carried with them traditions, cultural pride, and the weight of sacrifice. But beneath the surface of this immigrant dream lay turbulence. The marriage was fractured, strained by her father's dependence on alcohol and the heavy atmosphere it created at home. Gloria was only 2 or 3 years old when her parents' union collapsed. Though she was too young to fully understand, fragments of memory and family accounts told her of nights filled with fear, arguments that escalated, and moments when her mother's safety had been pushed dangerously to the edge. Gloria would later say she didn't carry many clear images of her father. Instead, what lingered was the knowledge that her mother had endured more than any woman should, and that survival had been hard-won. Following the separation, Gloria's mother gathered her children, Gloria and her 3 older siblings, and moved them to East Los Angeles, where her grandmother offered a place under her roof. That home was different, but not necessarily easier. Discipline ruled every corner. Her grandmother, shaped by a strict upbringing herself, allowed little tenderness. Daily routines came with rules, curfews, and expectations that often left the children feeling they were walking on a thin line. To survive, Gloria's mother and eldest brother started a small food business, preparing and selling meals to keep the family afloat. Their days began before sunrise and ended long after dusk. Even with these efforts, the family's financial struggles never eased fully. Gloria often described her childhood as one where joy was rare and responsibility came early. By the time she reached her teenage years, she had only completed up to the 8th grade, her education disrupted by the weight of circumstances pressing down on the family. At just 17, Gloria's life shifted dramatically. She became pregnant with her first daughter. The father, younger than she was, vanished quickly from the picture, leaving her to step into motherhood while still navigating adolescence herself. With her family's reluctant support, she relocated to a city in San Bernardino County, determined to start over. It was there she gave birth, holding on to the fragile hope that this child would be the anchor to a new life. Determined not to give in to despair, Gloria pushed forward with unrelenting energy. She juggled 2, sometimes 3 jobs at once while attending night classes in an attempt to complete her education. Her days were grueling, early mornings spent at work, evenings with her daughter, and nights with her books. Every choice was fueled by a single goal: to give her child the stability she herself had never known. But while Gloria fought to rise above her circumstances, her siblings were sinking. Alcohol became a constant in their lives, widening the distance between them and Gloria, who was determined to walk a straighter path. She spoke of the pain of watching her family unravel, of feeling like she was standing alone against a tide that threatened to swallow everything. At 20, Gloria entered her first marriage. For a brief time, life seemed steady. She had 2 more children, and for a moment, it appeared the foundation she longed for was finally within reach. But cracks soon began to form. Trust was broken by signs of betrayal, and arguments took root where love once stood. Gloria hesitated to leave, haunted by the idea of raising 3 children without a partner. But life, unpredictable and merciless, had another trial waiting. At 24, during what was meant to be a routine doctor's visit, Gloria was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. The news was devastating. The weight of the illness, combined with the responsibilities of motherhood, brought her to the edge of despair. Yet, in that darkness, she made one of the hardest decisions of her life. She filed for divorce. She chose to face her illness and her children's future on her own terms, with resilience that few could match. Not long after, fate introduced her to Thomas Alberto Tamayo. He was striking, the kind of man who drew attention effortlessly. Neighbors described him as magnetic, someone who could walk into a room and instantly command it. Many were drawn to him, but with Gloria, the connection felt different, intense, genuine, and transformative. Over time, their bond deepened into love. Gloria believed she had finally found the beginning of a new chapter, one that promised hope after years defined by endurance. Their marriage brought with it a sense of stability. Together, they formed a blended family, full of noise, laughter, and the chaos of everyday life. From their union came 3 more children, including twins born in 2017. Now the mother of 6, Gloria embraced the role with unstoppable energy. She was known for her relentlessness, constantly moving, constantly seeking ways to improve the lives of her children. Friends and neighbors saw her as a woman who never slowed down, who poured every ounce of herself into her family. But Gloria was more than just a mother. Her entrepreneurial spirit remained strong. Around the time of her twins' birth, she felt a stirring for something new. She turned to social media, seeing it not just as a platform, but as a tool, a way to merge her personal struggles with a larger purpose. Fitness, which had always been a cornerstone in her life, became her focus. After her last pregnancy, she battled with her body, her confidence, and her sense of identity. Yet instead of retreating, she chose to share her journey publicly. Her posts were raw, authentic, and deeply relatable. She spoke not only about exercise and discipline, but about self-acceptance, perseverance, and the daily fight to rise stronger. Through this, Gloria began to inspire others. Her story was no longer just about survival. It became a testament to transformation, proof that no matter the weight of the past, the future could still be rewritten. Gloria began to experiment with a new form of expression, sharing her journey through videos uploaded to digital platforms. At first, the clips were simple: short exercise routines filmed in modest spaces, practical advice recorded between her daily responsibilities, and heartfelt motivational messages aimed directly at mothers who, like her, were struggling to accept their bodies after pregnancy. She wanted her content to feel authentic, to remind women that self-care was not vanity, but survival. In the beginning, however, the reaction was muted. Views trickled in, but most of the engagement came from men, an audience very different from the one she had envisioned. Gloria had hoped to build a safe and empowering community for women, but instead, she often felt her efforts were misunderstood. Still, she refused to let discouragement take root. Her resilience, sharpened by years of hardship, guided her forward. She continued filming, posting day after day, driven by an unwavering consistency and the hope that one day her message would find its rightful home. Slowly, things began to shift. The algorithm started favoring her content, and the women she longed to reach began to notice her voice. Messages arrived from mothers across the country, some thanking her for helping them rediscover confidence, others sharing their own struggles in heartfelt detail. Gloria realized she was no longer speaking into the void. She was connecting. This connection transformed her platform. Piece by piece, video by video, she became a recognized fitness influencer. It didn't happen overnight. There was no single viral moment. Instead, it was built on persistence, 1,000 small steps that finally added up to something larger. Her following grew steadily. Soon she surpassed tens of thousands, and then hundreds of thousands. Eventually, her audience crossed the 165,000 marks. But what mattered more than numbers was impact. Her words were no longer seen as the instructions of a trainer. They were received as the guidance of someone who had lived through struggle and come out the other side. Women viewed her as a mirror of themselves and, at the same time, a beacon of hope. By the beginning of 2025, Gloria was 40 years old. To many, this stage of life might have been a time of reflection, a slowing down. For Gloria, it was the opposite. She dreamed bigger than ever. Her digital presence had created opportunities, but she longed for something more tangible, something rooted in face-to-face connection and community. It was during this chapter that she met Hector Garduño, a man who shared her passion for fitness and personal growth. Hector, a father of 4 daughters and slightly older than Gloria, carried himself with integrity. Those who knew him described him as disciplined, respectful, and unwavering in his dedication to both family and wellness. Their connection began with professional respect, but soon evolved into genuine admiration. With Hector's encouragement, Gloria's confidence deepened. She stepped away from the camera more often and began teaching classes in a local gym. Clients were drawn to her not simply because of the exercises she taught, but because of the story behind them. They saw her resilience as proof that transformation was possible, not only physical, but also emotional and spiritual. Together, Gloria and Hector envisioned building something greater, a gym of their own, a place where their shared vision of empowerment could be brought to life. Around mid-2025, Gloria accepted an invitation that would expand her voice even further. She joined a podcast dedicated to women's empowerment, a platform designed to encourage open dialogue about trauma, healing, and personal transformation. In episode 18, Gloria spoke openly about her life for the first time in such detail. She recounted her teenage pregnancy, describing the overwhelming fear and responsibility of raising a child while still being a child herself. She revealed how her cancer diagnosis had forced her to reframe her entire existence, teaching her the value of every single day. She spoke of the disappointment of her first marriage and the painful silence from certain family members during times when support should have been unconditional. Listeners were struck not only by her honesty, but also by the calm strength with which she delivered her story. Yet it was in a later episode, released on June 16th, that Gloria revealed the part of her life that few had ever glimpsed. Behind the polished social media posts and motivational words, she had been waging a private war within her own home. For the first time, she spoke of her ongoing separation from her husband, Thomas Alberto Tamayo. The divorce, she explained, had not been a clean break, but a festering wound that refused to heal. What should have been the closing of a chapter became an open battlefield, one where words were weapons and silence became a prison. Gloria described in painstaking detail how the constant undercurrent of hostility in her marriage had turned into something more corrosive than any single outburst. It was the slow, steady erosion of her identity, like waves wearing down stone. Every sarcastic remark, every dismissive laugh, every pointed reminder of supposed inadequacy chipped away at the woman she once knew herself to be. She confessed that, outwardly, she had carried on as if nothing was wrong. Her social media displayed smiles, birthday cakes, vacations, and the curated fragments of happiness that everyone shares online. But what no filter could hide was the exhaustion in her spirit, the invisible weight of walking through each day beside someone intent on reducing her. Living under the shadow of belittlement, constantly made to question her worth, left her feeling hollowed out. She likened it to being a ghost in her own home, a presence without power, a soul without voice. And yet, when she finally spoke publicly on that podcast, her voice was strikingly different. It was steady, unshaken. There was no tremor of fear in her tone, only the raw timbre of someone who had decided that silence had cost too much. What poured from her lips was not polished or rehearsed, but brutally honest, unfiltered, and, above all, courageous. Listeners were stunned. The confession carried a gravity that could not be ignored. Messages flooded in from women who heard their own stories echoed in her words. They thanked her for putting voice to what they had endured in private. They admitted they had mistaken silence for resilience. But Gloria's honesty helped them see that true strength sometimes begins with acknowledging pain, with dragging it out of the shadows and into the light. For Gloria herself, the moment was more than catharsis. It was transformation. She spoke not only for herself but for her children, insisting they deserved to see a mother who refused to bow to mistreatment. She wanted them to grow up watching dignity lived out daily, to witness resilience in the face of cruelty. Some listeners saw her testimony as an act of vulnerability, but to her it was nothing short of defiance. Her rebellion against despair, her refusal to surrender. Yet bold confessions ripple outward, stirring waters in ways no one can fully predict. Her words, though freeing, set in motion consequences that neither she nor her audience could have imagined. Only 5 days later, on Saturday, June 21st, Gloria appeared to be moving forward with her life. That evening, she dressed with care and joined family and friends at a bustling shopping center. They chose a well-loved sushi restaurant, the kind of place where laughter bounces off the walls, dishes clink rhythmically, and the air carries the aroma of fresh food mingled with the hum of conversation. To any casual observer, it looked like an ordinary outing, a group enjoying dinner, sharing smiles, and creating memories. For Gloria, it was more than a night out. It was proof that life could still hold normal joys, that she could still carve new beginnings out of fractured days. But she was not alone in this symbolic celebration of resilience. At her side sat Hector Garduño, her trusted business partner, the man who had believed in her when her confidence faltered. Together they had been building more than a gym. They were constructing a vision of independence, of stability, of future hope. Their conversation that night circled around progress and plans, dreams and determination. Every sentence spoken over the dinner table reinforced Gloria's belief that she was walking toward a new chapter, one she was authoring for herself. The restaurant swelled with life. Servers moved briskly between tables. Laughter rose from a group nearby, and the faint strains of background music created a familiar, almost comforting rhythm. Nothing about the night suggested the possibility of menace. Everything seemed to blur into the ordinary fabric of weekend leisure. Yet normalcy can be fragile. At 9:40 p.m., as Gloria and Hector stepped out into the cooling night air and made their way across the parking lot, the pattern of the evening abruptly fractured. A figure moved toward them with unsettling speed, each step sharp and deliberate. There were no words of greeting, no warning shouted across the distance, no moment to make sense of what was unfolding. In a heartbeat, the atmosphere shifted from calm to chaos. The man's intent was chillingly clear. What followed was not the continuation of an ordinary night, but the violent tearing apart of it. An act that would forever mark the evening as the beginning of a darker, more ominous chapter in Gloria's story. The scene was sudden, calculated, and devastating. As the attacker attempted to escape, fate intervened. An off-duty police officer nearby at the time heard the sound of gunfire. Without hesitation, he responded. He intercepted the suspect's vehicle and ordered him to stop. Instead of surrendering, the suspect chose confrontation, leading to a violent exchange of fire. Within moments, the attacker was struck down. When the authorities confirmed his identity, shock rippled through the community. The man responsible was Thomas Alberto Tamayo, Gloria's estranged husband. While chaos unfolded outside, paramedics rushed to save Gloria and Hector. They worked with urgency, transporting both to a nearby hospital. But the injuries were too severe. Despite every medical effort, neither survived. News of the tragedy spread at lightning speed. Within hours, Gloria's name was everywhere. Social media platforms flooded with posts from her followers, from fitness enthusiasts who had drawn strength from her, and from women across the country who had seen her as a symbol of resilience. Clips of her smiling, encouraging others, and reminding women of their worth were shared again and again. What began as disbelief quickly turned to collective mourning. The timing of it all was what left many shaken. Just days earlier, Gloria had spoken publicly for the first time about her separation from Thomas. On the podcast, she had described her pain, her struggle, and her decision to walk away from a toxic marriage. To some, her death felt like more than tragedy. It felt like a crime that had been foretold. People began calling it what it was: a femicide. As investigators pieced together the story of her marriage, disturbing details surfaced. Friends and family explained that tension between Gloria and Thomas had existed for years, even as far back as the birth of their first child together. What began as disagreements over money escalated into deeper rifts that eroded their bond. Gloria carried the heavy weight of responsibility. Working multiple jobs, caring for children, managing the household, while Thomas, by many accounts, showed little initiative. A recurring point of conflict was Gloria's desire for order. She valued structure, cleanliness, and a sense of stability. Thomas rarely respected that need, and the imbalance grew. But the real fracture came when Gloria began speaking of her dream to create fitness videos for mothers. Still healing physically and emotionally after the birth of her twins, she longed to transform her insecurities into a source of empowerment for others. Instead of encouragement, she met resistance. Accounts later revealed that Thomas mocked her ambitions, dismissing her body and belittling her hopes. He told her that no one would care about a woman with stretch marks, about a mother whose body had changed with pregnancy. His words were sharp and cold, meant not to protect, but to silence. For a time, Gloria listened. Self-doubt crept in, and she shelved her idea. But the flame was not extinguished. Slowly, her daughters began lifting her up, urging her to pursue her passion. Their support reignited the fire that Thomas had tried to extinguish. With them at her side, Gloria returned to her vision, and from that courage came the platform that would later inspire thousands. In the days following Gloria's tragic passing, her family, already shattered by grief, found themselves thrust into a spotlight they had never asked for. The children, once accustomed to living quietly and privately, were now watched closely by neighbors, reporters, and strangers online who dissected every detail of their mother's life. The weight of sorrow collided with the weight of public curiosity, and for her eldest daughter, the burden was almost unbearable. Still, despite the ache in her chest and the trembling of her voice, the daughter chose to speak. She wanted people to know her mother not as a headline, not as a name tied to a crime, but as a living, breathing person who had filled their home with warmth and laughter. Through tears, she admitted that she still expected to hear the sound of Gloria's keys at the door, to see her step inside and smile as if everything had returned to normal. Her words painted a portrait of longing, the kind of emptiness that lingers in every corner of a house when the person who once animated it is suddenly gone. Meanwhile, speculation flourished in the noisy corners of the internet about Hector's role in Gloria's life. Some whispered that he was her new partner, but her daughter clarified the truth. Hector was not her mother's romantic partner. He was her business partner, a friend, and a collaborator in building their shared vision of a gym. That night, they had simply been finishing a meeting. They were closing chapters of work, not beginning a romance. Her eldest son offered his own reflection, one that cut sharply through the noise. He described his mother's marriage to Thomas in painfully simple words: a living hell. To outsiders, Thomas often portrayed himself as a respectable husband and stepfather. He appeared calm, composed, supportive. But behind closed doors, within the walls of their home, the reality was far different. The older daughters had always sensed what outsiders could not. From the very beginning, they had harbored deep mistrust toward Thomas. To the public eye, he seemed respectable, polite, smooth-spoken, even charming. In social gatherings, He acted the part of a supportive husband and stepfather, speaking with courtesy, shaking hands warmly, and smiling at the right moments. He wore, as they would later say, a carefully crafted mask. But behind closed doors, away from the gaze of neighbors and acquaintances, that mask slipped. What they witnessed instead was a man consumed by ego, someone who needed to control the narrative of his life at any cost. He would tell others that he was the sole provider of the household, a hard-working man keeping the family together. Yet the truth, as Gloria's daughters understood, was starkly different. It was Gloria who shouldered the true weight of survival. She worked tirelessly, taking on multiple jobs, managing the children's needs, and maintaining the household, while also pouring her energy into building her presence online. Thomas's claims of provision were more performance than reality, carefully curated to protect his pride. After her last pregnancy, Gloria made the decision to undergo reconstructive surgery to remove excess skin, a procedure she spoke about with honesty and transparency in her social media journey. For her, it was about reclaiming confidence and healing both physically and emotionally. But Thomas twisted even this moment. He bragged openly to friends that he had paid for it, taking credit for something that had nothing to do with his efforts. To him, it was another tool for self-promotion, another way to maintain his image as the provider he wanted people to believe he was. In the final months before the tragedy, as Gloria's career flourished, Thomas's demeanor darkened. While she gained thousands of followers, built a loyal base for her online store, and earned admiration from women across the country, something inside him began to shift. What should have been pride in his wife's success morphed instead into resentment. Jealousy took root and grew like a shadow. He mocked her newfound influence, questioned her appearance, and chipped away at her confidence. These attacks were not physical but psychological, subtle yet cutting. Bit by bit, Gloria lost respect for him, her heart pulling away until eventually, her presence in the marriage was only physical. Her emotions and loyalty had long since left. As early as a year before her death, Gloria had been clear. She no longer wanted to share her life with Thomas. But he refused to accept her decision. Divorce to him was an admission of failure, a public embarrassment he would not allow. It was not until early 2025, after nearly 15 years of marriage, that Gloria made her final choice. She announced she was ending it, once and for all. She was no longer willing to wait for a change that would never come. In the aftermath, Gloria's mother revealed chilling truths. She spoke of Thomas's obsessive behavior, how he followed her daughter from place to place, how he appeared suddenly at her work, and how his words carried veiled threats. According to her, he was a man who could not bear the idea of losing control, and in her words, he would do anything to destroy her. After the tragedy, the community turned its grief into action. Support poured in from all corners. A GoFundMe campaign was launched to provide for Gloria's children, who ranged in age from 8 to 24. The organizers described her as radiant, a motivator, a source of strength, and a mother whose life had been stolen too soon. Within days, contributions surpassed $25,000, offering some measure of relief to cover funeral expenses and daily needs for the children left behind. At the same time, Hector's daughters launched their own campaign. They remembered their father as devoted, hardworking, and filled with purpose. He had loved deeply, they said, and his absence created an unfillable void in their family. To them, he was not only a father, but a guiding light, now extinguished far too early. But while compassion dominated much of the internet, darker currents emerged. Social media turned into a battlefield of narratives. For every voice demanding justice for Gloria, another surfaced to defend Thomas. Some insisted he had been a loyal husband, a caring father, a man who gave everything to his family. They pointed to the length of the marriage as supposed evidence of its strength, ignoring the hidden struggles Gloria had bravely begun to reveal. Even more disturbing were the voices that shifted blame onto Gloria. Strangers speculated cruelly about her choices, accusing her of damaging Thomas's pride or of behaving in ways they deemed inappropriate. Some suggested she should have been more modest, more restrained, as if her independence and visibility were offenses. This undercurrent of misogyny exposed a grim reality. Even in death, women are often judged more harshly than the men who harm them. Videos began circulating from people who had known Thomas personally. Some painted Gloria as manipulative, attempting to rewrite her role in the relationship. One clip cited a domestic complaint filed in January, alleging that Gloria had been arrested for attacking Thomas. Though unconfirmed, the rumor spread quickly, muddying the narrative and sparking debate. Others went further, insisting Thomas had provided everything she could ever want. They claimed her growing bond with Hector had humiliated him publicly, and that repeated embarrassment had pushed him to his breaking point. These voices attempted to rationalize the irrational, to explain away the unexplainable. Investigators, meanwhile, uncovered chilling details. In the days before the attack, Thomas had allegedly begun tracking Gloria's movements. Authorities believe he installed a GPS-like device on her car, allowing him to monitor where she went in real time. On the night of the tragedy, he followed her from the moment she left home. Witnesses suggested he lingered in the shadows near the restaurant, waiting and watching for nearly an hour. He knew she was with Hector. He knew exactly where they were. And according to the investigation, he knew precisely what he intended to do. Investigators later pieced together an even darker possibility. According to police speculation, Thomas's plan may not have ended with the attack outside the restaurant. Evidence suggested he had prepared for more. Authorities believed that after leaving the scene, his next destination might have been Gloria's home. If not for the swift intervention of the off-duty officer, the tragedy could have extended further. The idea sent chills through the community, an unsettling reminder of how close the night came to becoming an even greater catastrophe. Yet no matter how the narrative is told, whether through the official reports of law enforcement, the voices of family members, or the conflicting arguments of strangers on the internet, one truth cuts through all the noise. It is the truth that cannot be reshaped, silenced, or denied. 11 children lost their parents that night. 11 young lives were permanently altered in a matter of moments, their futures reshaped by a violent decision none of them chose. These children were not statistics, not footnotes in a tragic headline. They were sons and daughters who depended on their parents for comfort, for protection, and for guidance. Gloria's 6 children and Hector's 5 were left to navigate a world without the steady presence of those who had raised them. What had once been households filled with laughter, routine, and parental advice became places marked by absence. For them, the story will never be a line in a news article. It will be the lifelong weight of loss. That is the deepest tragedy at the heart of this case. Beyond the speculation, beyond the courtroom discussions and the polarized debates online, lies the unbearable reality of children who must now grow up without the voices that once guided them. In the weeks that followed, counselors, teachers, and extended family members stepped in, trying to provide the support that the parents once gave. Communities organized fundraisers, vigils, and online campaigns to remind the children that they were not forgotten. Strangers from across the country wrote messages of solidarity, donating to ensure food, shelter, and education would not be taken from them as well. But no amount of money, no number of kind words, could truly replace what had been taken. And so, as people reflected on Gloria's story, a larger question emerged. One that extended beyond this single family, beyond this single crime. How do we protect the next Gloria? How do we ensure that another woman, another mother, does not meet the same fate? The question became more than rhetorical. It became a call to action, echoing in conversations about prevention, about laws, about resources for families in crisis.